Hello Sofa Squad. Today we're going to be talking about some of my opinions, my thoughts, some things that I noticed during the interviews that AV Watchman posted on his channel, and these were with neighbors at the former residents of the apartments as well as the current one. So I want to talk about some of those highlights and what really jumped out to me. Now all the videos I'm going to be talking about today, as well as AV's channel, all those links are down below, as well as where you can contact authorities if you do have any information on these two missing babies. Now again, what we're talking about is the missing case of the two baby boys, Orrin and Orson West. So let's start discussing one of the videos where AV goes to the apartments and he ends up talking to one of the neighbors. It's a gentleman. So this takes place at the Casa Loma Apartments in Bakersfield, California. Now remember, this is the place that they lived at, the adoptive parents, before they moved to the house where, over in California City, where we're seeing all of this video surveillance and stuff like that. Now specifically, they were in apartment 116. Now right off the bat, he talks to a woman. She's going up the stairs. She doesn't want to be on film, but she does say very quickly, you know what, these people never seem to have come out of their apartment. And that's a theme that I want to discuss in all of these videos. Now the next little bit we see is a gentleman comes down and he's the one who does some extensive talking. So let's talk about some of the patterns, some of the themes that we see across what lots of people say. Now he will say that him and his wife have lived there for about 4 years. He described the adoptive parents, Trezzell and Jacqueline, as really quiet people, not very sociable. They really kept to themselves. And he will say, you know what, I think they had 3 or 4 kids. Now he does say the parents seem like they really tried to avoid people. If I was coming and they were coming out, they might back away and go the other way. They really tried to go out of their way to go a certain way to get to their car. Now he also mentions that Trezzell carried some kind of stick around with him at times, to the point that he felt like maybe Trezzell was into martial arts or something like that. And again, he says something that's becoming a very familiar story. He's like, these kids never came out to play. Now remember, we hear the same story from the current neighbor over in California City. Now this gentleman at the Bakersfield location, he will say, you know what, when I did see the kids though, they didn't seem to be harmed. Now he makes mention of like an elderly type lady who was in a blue car that would come to visit, and this seems to be Trezzell's mother. Now he will also say, you know what, I don't ever really remember a time of seeing 6 children at one time with them. And this is kind of a theme that we'll keep hearing, is it's really hard to lock down all these people being together at one time. Now, of course, all the stuff I'm going over, this doesn't paint them as guilty. It really is just stuff that makes me say, what's up with that? So, and we'll just take a sofa sidebar here on that for a second. So I myself, when I have lived in apartments, I'm not gonna lie, okay, I'm the type of person that's like, don't make eye contact with the neighbors, don't get to know them, that means you'll have to talk to them. I hate to sound like that, but I just am somebody who, when I'm home, I want my own space, I don't want to have to deal with my neighbors, anything like that. So I'm not unfriendly. If you run into me in the street, I'm your typical southerner, I'm gonna wave, hey, how's it going? Let's talk about everything under the sun. So there's that. Now, on the same note though, I wasn't living in an apartment with 6 kids. So there's a part of me that's like, ugh, my gosh, even before COVID, this apparently was the theme with these people. So it seems like it would be very claustrophobic. It seems like children have lots of energy. They would want to get out and play. It seems like with 6 kids, you might be, 4 kids, 2 kids, 1 kid. You would want to be going out and doing stuff. That's the part that kind of seems odd to me, but to each their own. So this same gentleman, he talks about an example where he would get juice boxes or something like that, and he would like distribute them to the neighbors. This guy sounds like an amazing neighbor to have, and it sounds like such like a tight-knit community where they're all talking and hanging out. I mean, that does sound pretty cool. So he's like, you know what, we would send our daughter down and knock on the door, be like, y'all want some juice? And they would never come to the door. They'd be like, no thank you, through the door, through the peephole, whatever. And he's like, look, when I did see Trezzell or whatever, I was like, hey, you want some? He was cool, but it was just very let's get done with this transaction, let's move on. Now when AV asked him, what, do you think that their behavior on that interview was normal or whatever, to me it was interesting that he said, I've never dealt with them to any degree to even be able to tell. That's how little I dealt with these people, how little I saw them. And he also says, you know what, they were so quiet, I didn't even know they moved out. So I mean, again, right there, I'm just like, whoa. I mean, that's just the level that these people were shut in. And again, we'll hear this theme of this was before COVID. So let's talk about the next little interview that he does. Now he's talking with a young lady. She's at the complex. She doesn't want to be on film. And so he goes into more depth and he gets kind of like a different angle from her. Now she will give a date. She'll say, yep, yep, September 23rd, I saw these kids, and this is how I know I saw them. So there's an incident with this young lady's car. Apparently there was, car break-ins, that kind of stuff going on, and something happened with her car. And so she realizes that this apartment has cameras in it. So this is the adoptive grandmother. And so when the young lady goes up and she knocks on the door, she's like, hey, you know what, can we basically roll the tape back? And she's like, you know what, the cameras don't really point over there. So she comes out, and then kind of like unbeknownst to her, like the kids toddle out. So she's given us this date of like, look, you know what, we can work with September 23rd here. Now the grandmother will say, you know what, these are my daughter's kids, these aren't my kids. And so there's that. Now another thing that goes on is this young lady, she'll switch back and forth between languages. So she'll speak in Spanish, she'll speak in English. And so I don't know what she's saying in Spanish, but AV seems to have translated it. And again, the link's down in the description below. Look at his pinned comment. And so the lady essentially is talking about two older boys that were with this couple at one point. And they were older boys. And let's say, when I mean older, I mean 10, 11 years old, somewhere around there. That basically these kids were sent back because they were bad. And I believe what she is saying in Spanish that AV translated is that they were, smoking some stuff and like running off and stuff like that. And so, it is what it is. So they got sent back apparently. So for sidebar here for a minute. So when she was saying that, it made me immediately go back to that original unedited interview that the adoptive parents did with the media. The first and only really interview I've seen. And so when they're talking and they're like, what if somebody finds them or whatever they said? And the dad, Trezzell, is like, they're gonna be rambunctious. And it just was so weird to me that he said that, because I was just like, oh, that's kind of odd. And again, this could be my perception. I'm very curious to see what y'all think. My immediate perception of that, I was just like, oh, it's almost like he's saying, so don't, turn them away, or, don't abandon them again, or don't hurt them because of their rambunctiousness. It was just an odd descriptive word to use at first, because it told me that bothers him. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that was like, okay, that's an issue for him. And so, again, my mind just starts going, and I'm like, okay, nobody sees the kids. They're all quiet all the time. They have to stay in the house because he doesn't want anyone making a sound, apparently. Again, that's my sofa 2 cents right there. I don't know that for fact. It's my opinion. So it just makes me wonder, okay, so here, we've heard of 2 other kids getting sent back. And again, my mind just wonders, because these kids were adopted. So what if there was no sending them back in that capacity, but something else had to happen? I don't know. So she talks about the foster boys, coming to knock on her door to play. And she's like, you know what, with my kids, or really anybody that's coming over, whatever, if you want to play in the house, that's one thing. If you're going out of the house, I'm going to be there watching. And so she was like, but the boys would come over, they want to play. And I would make sure, like, does your parents know? That kind of thing. Now she was like, look, if my kids went over there knocking the door, they want to answer the door. They want to come to the door. It was ignoring them. And she was like, look, you know what? The boys were afraid of Trezzell. They were just like, he's really, really mean. Now she too also repeats the story of, you know what? We never really saw all these kids together. We never really saw the kids with Trezzell. We never really saw this whole unit operating as a unit. And she says too, you know what? Even pre-COVID, there was this aspect of they were just holed up in there. Now she also mentions, the father being, standoffish, not really saying hello, and that type of energy. Now she also talks about with the grandmother, the adoptive grandmother that she had the interaction with over the cameras. And she was like, oh, she, has adopted kids too. And, I went over there for a little party when basically she had officially adopted the children. It was like change their last name type situation. Now this aspect of the family, each of them doing the adoption thing, I go 2 ways with that. Part of it seems kind of odd. Part of it doesn't. I have seen situations like this where this is how this goes and there's nothing sinister to it. It's what a family does. They each are doing this and there's nothing wrong with it and they're loving people or whatever. Again, I don't know these people personally, so I can't sit here and say. But one thing that questions my mind, and already the one guy said she was kind of elderly or whatever. My question is, how old is the grandmother? I guess I have a thought of, when I think of grandmother, I have a certain image in my mind, and I'm like, oh my god, that would be so exhausting to be chasing children around constantly, especially adopting your own. So that part makes me say, well, how many kids was she having in there? How often were these kids, the adoptive parents, Trezzell and Jacqueline's kids, coming to stay? It just seems like like a lot. Now again, if any of y'all out there in Sofa Squad know the exact age of the grandmother, whatever, drop it in the comments. I would love to know. Okay, so that being said, let's just round this out with one last thing. Y'all, we're gonna have to talk about the damn ice cream house. I can't believe that I'm having to have this conversation. It's almost like a bad fiction story. The fact that there is an ice cream house in this case is like the icing on the cake. Or should I say, ice cream on the case? Sofa sidebar. Yo, I never realized how creepy ice cream trucks were until I got older and like I was living in South Florida. And not all of the ice cream trucks down there, but a majority were like these rundown vans that would go through these neighborhoods, and you would hear that creepy music, but it was almost like their audio system was not working right. So it was like slowed down and had this like eerie, ominous so that's not the ice cream truck song, but it felt appropriate. And I was just like, kids, don't go to that truck. That's the last Klondike bar you'll ever have. So here's the deal, y'all. Just a few notes on the ice cream house. First of all, person's letting the dogs out barking. We've got that white van parked out there. We have the blue car that sounds like and fits the description of the grandmother, that was going to visit or whatever. We have a random arm sticking out videoing. It has a real bad vibe. It has a real bad vibe to it. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what is circulating between this entire network of people, but it has me very nervous for these little babies. Now, y'all, don't forget that I have put the phone numbers, stuff like that down in the description below. If you have any information about this, obviously call. Hopefully something will come up. These babies will be returned. They will be fine. So we can all hope for the best. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the channel members, the Patreons, the mods, the subscribers, the viewers. I couldn't be here without you. And let's bring hope and justice to whatever is going to come of these missing boys. Thank you again. I will talk to y'all later.